Alright. Yeah, this Chris Cornell talks about the Beatles. Seeing as I'm doing loads of covers from him, I thought I'd do this. Yeah, him doing covers of the Beatles, I mean. I thought, yeah, I'd do him talking about the Beatles. So yeah, let's go.
What got me into prog was my oldest brother. He took a turn into kind of like ELP, yes, sort of anything that seemed a little weird.
Rough turn.
Yeah. And
But you don't consider your music prog?
no, not really.
But
no.
you were into it?
Yeah, for a couple years. Yeah, I went in.
I don't know why I could never do it.
I think for me it was like I smoked pot at a really young age, and then after a couple of years I stopped. And,
Yeah.
And I think it opened the door to that, just
Right.
the sort of fantasy world of
Yeah,
there's elves and Tolkien's living in there somewhere, and and I loved it. And of course, it was the perfect setup for punk rock,
Right.
because
Just
by the time punk rock hit and I heard it and understood it, the timing couldn't have been better, because it was like, thank God, this is awesome.
Yeah, snap me out of it.
Yeah.
I'm awake now.
Yeah.
Thank you for waking me from my trance.
This is fantastic.
Who were your other bands when you were a kid?
Well, the Beatles was the band when I was a kid, and it was
Forever, right?
I don't know how old, 8 or something. One of my neighbors, he had like 4 older brothers, and the oldest one had been kicked out of the house, and he just left all his records in the basement.
Right.
And so I stole his Beatles records, and he had everything.
All of them.
Every reissue, every compilation, every album.
Yeah.
You know, and the first run of every album, and I have all
Right.
of them.
Yeah.
But they were wrecked. Like, all the sleeves were ruined, water damaged, and I just grabbed them on a whim. And I had one of those old student stereos that packs up like a suitcase.
Yeah.
And I just sat in my bedroom and started listening to them. And by then they had broken up, and it wasn't. The Beatles had nothing to do with pop culture.
Right. They were just the mythic presence over everything.
Yeah.
The
And,
Beatles.
Yeah, you would see like the Let It Be pictures were in everyone's house.
Right.
And so they were there. It was almost like other family members. This is my mom,
You mean like
my dad.
wait, the white album pictures?
Or the white album
The 8 by
pictures,
10s, yeah.
And then the cover of Let It Be was 4
Right,
photos.
right, yeah.
And that would be, that's the big difference between vinyl LPs and anything else, is that these albums, if it was a huge album, it was in everyone's living room, and you saw it when
Took
you
up
went
space.
inside.
Yeah.
Everyone had that Let It Be album in their living room, and with the Beatles looking at you.
Yeah, so right away you could go like, yeah, Beatles.
So,
Which records were the ones where you were like, I gotta hear that again?
well, I remember really getting into Sgt. Pepper's, of course. I really got into the White Album. I really got into Abbey Road with headphones. And
For that run on side B?
I don't know what it was about it, but it didn't do it for me listening to it on speakers, but I discovered that there's such a thing as headphones that sound good. Maybe that was the beginning of like good sounding headphones.
Yeah.
And I remember cranking it super loud, and I couldn't believe the production of Abbey Road. Like,
Well, there's that whole run through, like, You Never Given Me Your Money,
Right.
Polythene Pam, and then like that whole, like, they're all connected.
Which
and
is prog, really.
Yeah, it is. But I think it was for them just to like, well, how are we going to put all this shit together? We got a bunch of fragments.
Yeah, when they came out with that with that album of number ones and then demos,
Yeah.
I kind of learned by then, like, oh, that's how those songs came about, because they had all these cool little bits, and then
Right, yeah.
they couldn't make songs out of them.
Right.
Me and Mr. Mustard made just a shitty song.
Right, but part of this weird thing.
Part of the weird thing, it was awesome.
Yeah.
Because you're sitting there thinking, what were these guys thinking when they did this?
How high were they?
How high do you have to be to come up with Mr. Mustard and Polythene Pam?
I love
really high.
Yeah, really high. I love that lick on Polythene.
Imagine all the people.
I'm not listening to that 'cause I think I've actually got that to react to. But yeah, it reminded me when he said he nicked the Beatles albums. There's a Bob Dylan story that's the same as that. It's someone talking about him, saying he met Bob Dylan when he was a kid, like younger, and he'd been out playing, but he was just this young guitar player, really no different to anyone else. And he says, and he come around my house once with other people. And he says, and he was admiring my records, and then the mate he went out of town or something and let someone Bob Dylan know look after the house, and Bob Dylan went round there and I think robbed about 200 albums, 200 vinyls off of that man. And the man said I went looking for him, and he said I bumped into someone and said, you seen a boy called Bob Dylan? And he said, the mate, he went, no, but he must be pretty popular because you're about the fourth person who's come round here looking for him. And Bob Dylan was our little toe rag. So I like that story. What else did he say? Yeah, the stuff with me, Mr. Mustard, that's just such a great run. What was the other thing he said? Oh no, it'll go back.
Yeah, you would see like the Let It Be pictures were in everyone's Let It Be album in their living room and with the Beatles looking at you.
Yeah, so right away you could go like, yeah.
To Sgt. Pepper's, of course. I really got into the White Album. I really got into Abbey Road with listening to it on speakers, but I discovered...
Oh yeah, that's true. Headphones. Every time I tell people to listen to shit with headphones, you do just get more from it, especially something like the Beatles. So I 100% agree. Especially something like Sgt. Pepper's is so... There's a lot going on. And with headphones you just pick it out easier. Speakers, it can all kind of get lost and it's not quite as... Well, it's not the only thing you can hear. Like these sound cancelling, so I can't hear shit other than what's coming through these when they're playing. And then you can't beat that for listening to music. Yeah, what else did he say? There's something else as
There's
well.
such a thing as headphones that sound good.
Had a bunch of fragments.
Yeah, when just a shitty song.
Right, but part of this weird thing.
Part of the weird thing was I heard it and understood it at the time and couldn't something. One of my neighbors, he had like...
Yeah, that is what they did know, and it's actually McCartney's idea. The end of Abbey Road, or the second side of Abbey Road, which is genius. But it was actually McCartney's idea. Lennon wasn't a fan of that kind of stuff. Lennon actually was a fan of records. It was Paul McCartney that said, let's put all these together and make them flow. And it was just like he said, little bits of nothing song that they put together and made a fucking masterpiece second side of an album. That run is just, and it ends with Her Majesty, the album, doesn't it? Yeah. Actually, I should do a cover of it. I can play that. I love playing that. It's such a fun song to play. The chords are just so fun. Actually, yeah, it's just a fun song to sing. But anyway, yeah, that's the reaction. There would be more Chris Cornell covers coming as well. But yeah, that's the reaction. Sweet.